Welcome, everybody. We're here again with our podcast series around the Story Way. Today, we're going to talk about job relations, which is a component of TWI that we've been using here over the course of, I'll say, the last 4 or 5 years. With me today is Oscar Roche, our friend from Australia, who's in. There's always a circus when Oscar's in town, and the circus is a 3-ring all the way around. It's fantastic. And then Kylie's with us as she's part of our job relations coaching and support. This is the 5th of probably, I don't know, it'll be 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 episodes of things as we talk about the Story Way. It's an ever-growing way of how we do what we do. And today is job relations, which is, from my perspective, one of the more impactful pieces that we've found through time. Maybe start just by giving a little history. We talked about it the last episode, but the way we found Oscar goes back to when Mike Caston and I went to the Catacon conferences, and this probably goes back 6 or 7 years. We were down at, I think we were down
20.
We were down in Charleston, and I had been interested in the Kata routine or the improvement routine as maybe a way that we could enhance employee growth and employee development. I had trouble getting into the conference, but arrived a little bit late, and Oscar had just started his discussion about job relations. And I sat there, it dawned on me that the Kata routine in conjunction with job relations absolutely was the way that we could significantly impact the way that we help people move through their careers. And so what I didn't realize was Mike Caston was kind of on about the same kind of thing, because the next year Mike orchestrated a lunch between the 3 of us and a few other folks that I thought was completely random, that Oscar simply sat down at the table and started visiting, and Mike had orchestrated, and God bless him, because it's led to an excellent relationship going forward. So with that, maybe Oscar, I'll let you give a little bit of background to yourself, and Kylie will do the same with you here in a second.
So how far back, Pat?
Well, give us the pertinent information.
So background in manufacturing, applied degree in applied science, used that a little bit back, and then went into manufacturing as a supervisor. And then following that into a production management role in a pineapple cannery up in Brisbane in Australia. Then from that into an operations management role over in sort of this more towards the middle of the country in a orange juice factory. And then moved back to hometown of Griffith, central New South Wales, and started to do work with a logistics company, and myself and the company was a square peg in a round hole.
Who was square and who was round?
We were both quite different. And they wanted me to move to the city where the business belonged, and I certainly did not want to do that. So we parted company positively, but it just wasn't going to work. And that's when I went out on my own and started to do work, basically compliance-based work. That led into, we then, with 5 other people, built a cherry packing plant. 2003, that got me back into operations, and through a very good friend in Vietnam at the time, he introduced me to some continuous improvement principles. Visual workplace, visual thinking was the first one. One thing led to another, and discovered purely by accident this thing called TWI, training with an industry, and then had the institute come over and train us, and then we've started to work with companies to help them develop the skills associated with such, and that's what led to me meeting you guys, or you ultimately in Austin in Texas, I think it was.
That's right. So Kylie, how about you?
Well, mine won't be nearly as long and exciting as that.
Because you're a lot younger than me, that's why.
Maybe I'll get there, but
I'm sure you will.
Yeah. No, I'm just from the Chicagoland area. Went to Iowa State University and knew right away I wanted to go into human resources because I liked people and I liked people challenges. Went there for the 4 years to get my bachelor's, and then right out of school, got this job at Story Construction, and I've been the human resources generalist here ever since, almost 4 years now. So,
and big things in the offering here coming for you, right?
Yeah. It's not just a big lunch. I've got halfway done with my first baby boy, or is on the way. So
congratulations,
excited.
that's fantastic. Yes. So we're talking about job relations, and I'm sure there's some people out there that don't really have any earthly idea what that is. Oscar, you also talked about TWI, or training with industry. Why don't you give a little bit of history of what TWI is, then how does job relations fit into that?
Right. TWI stands for Training with an Industry, and don't be misled by the term training, as I think many people are, because people hear that and assume that it's a training it's a training program, or it's a way to develop training only for people who work in a particular workplace. Far from the truth. So TWI encompasses a set of routines which will help develop countermeasure skills to the common problems that leaders will meet as they go about their day-to-day work. It started during the Second World War. It was a countermeasure action to the Americans getting involved in the war and factories losing the male labour they'd had for years and years, and that labour being replaced by women and farm labourers who were unskilled. Productivity and quality dropped dramatically, and the War and Manpower Commission became very apparent that the war was going, as I understand it, was going to be a war of attrition, and whoever could get quality products, planes, ammunition, guns and all the rest of it, to the front line the quickest and the most effectively was probably going to win the war. War and Manpower Commission realised that, developed a program within industry to help bring these the frontline leaders up to speed, help the frontline leaders get new workers up to speed very quickly in terms of quality and productivity. 3 key skills were identified. One was the skill of instructing, teaching someone new skills. One was the skill of leading, and one was the skill of improving based on the resources that you have. And the one we're here to discuss is the skill of leading people, skill of leading others. In other words, getting people to follow you. And the routine that supported that was job relations.
So the ironic thing about that is we win the war, and that's all fantastic, and we bring all the soldiers home, and they go back into the factories to some degree, and the country loses the theoretically need to do this. And so effectively in this country it stopped. The 70s and the 80s, the Japanese picked it up. And
well, it started before then. The Japanese started picking up, according to timelines from within Toyota in 1953.
Okay, so
when they started picking it up.
Not too long after the war, and their productivity, their quality, all of that, certainly in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, far outpaced American manufacturers. In the last 20 years, TWI has resurged within American manufacturing and beyond. It's something that applies to manufacturers certainly, but it applies just about at any kind of situation where you need to instruct folks, you need to lead folks, you need to make things better. And so we've adopted both JR, job relations, and job instructions, the topic of another episode. Today's about job relations. So, Kylie, what is job relations? In your words, we'll see if it passes muster with Oscar.
Yeah, to me, job relations is really just all about trust. And if we do a good job of leading people and treating them with respect, and do things where we're developing or strengthening our JR line, which is, in my words or my understanding, really about strengthening that trust between supervisor or just person and employee, then we're doing a good job of using the routine well and supporting our employees.
So you have a card sitting in front of you, looks a little bit like this.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about the two sides of the card and what a person could find on those, and then how a supervisor might use each one of those sides.
Yeah. When I'm explaining it now that I'm kind of starting to teach people about this, I talk about there's the reactive and what's the word I'm looking for?
Proactive.
Thank you. Proactive. And so we're going either way. We're either, reacting, and then we're on the how to handle a problem side of the card, and going through, what are our next steps and potential actions that we're going to take a first round step at trying to solve that problem. And if we take that action and it doesn't go well, great. We're going to get information and go about it again. And I think one of the really good things that I've found from an HR perspective, utilizing this routine with people, is that aspect of it doesn't have to be final. That circle aspect of the routine to say, let's just take one step. We're going to take one action. And if we try that and we don't like it, or the best thing is we're going to get more facts, then we'll go back around. So that's that reactive side. But really, hoping to get people on that proactive side, which is the foundation side, the 4 foundations, and helping them kind of before we hit a problem or need to get reactive. And I think it's working.
I think so too. So what are the foundations?
So let each worker know how they are doing, give credit when due, tell people in advance about changes that will affect them, and make best use of each person's ability.
So from your perspective, are those equally important? Are they, and when you're using them, do you get different reactions to different situations? Or so those are great things. Mm-hmm. And what's the rest of the story with them?
Yeah. I think they all are absolutely essential in different aspects. And a lot of what have been finding when we've been doing the foundations follow-up classes is a lot of instances where I'm helping that employee realize they're using several at one time. And so they kind of will go into it with, okay, today we're on let each worker know how they're doing. And so, I told Joe Schmo that this was going, and then he did that well. And so we talked about, he did that well and the impact of that, and, moving forward, what maybe he'll have to do, and that he's really good at it. And so we're going to have him continue. And I'm like, you don't realize, but you just used all 4 of them. And here's the specific moments of that conversation that you had with him in which you're using all 4. So I think they're all really important to me, or at least I would say maybe to my generation. The give credit when due is where you have the best time of building that really strong relationship, because we like to hear when we're doing good things, and we want to know, because that's that motivation to please and whatnot. So, but they're all really essential, and they all overlap so much.
I'm interested in, you said your generation. Why particularly do you feel, I'm not saying you're wrong, but it intrigues me why you said that. Why do you feel it's more relevant to your generation? Because this could be important going forward. Yeah. That awareness.
Yeah. Well,
why do you feel it?
I don't know. I mean, I think obviously I can speak to my own perspectives, but also just when I hear about, our other engineers and talking to them, and, the ones who have really good relationships with their supervisors and whatnot, they just kind of talk about having that informal relationship, and it's not just always to work and then leave. It's, me and this person, we hang out for a while or whatnot, but you find out kind of in there's a lot of that person is telling them that they're a great employee. And, I read their reviews, and when they get exceeds expectations and they talk through, what they did well, it's that motivating piece, because they see that person as, either a friend or a parental figure or whatever else in their life, that it extends so much outside of just boss to employee relationship. And it goes a long way.
Sure. So the one that I've, I guess, surprised me a little bit, and we had to kind of learn, not how to manage it, but had to learn what it really meant, was tell people in advance of changes that will affect them. And Oscar, why don't you share kind of the implications of that one?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things. One is the key word there is it will. So we're not debating a change here. We know something's coming and it will affect them. So that's first thing, is clarification on that. It doesn't say it might affect them. It says tell people in advance about a change that will affect them. So that's one point. The second, I think sometimes when people initially learn that or become aware of it or conscious of it, I think the first reaction is, well, if I tell them in advance about this change that will affect them, they'll be okay with it. And I think that's misconception number one, is they probably won't be, but the point is we tell them in advance because we respect their right to have an emotional response. I think that's a critical thing to get our heads around. And more so, if we tell them in advance and give them that right to emotionally respond, then we are also giving ourselves time to help them through that. Because the second part, it says on the card, tell them why if possible and work with them to accept the change. So if we're going to make a change that's going to affect them, then we have a duty as leaders to A, permit that emotional response, and B, help them through it. And I think that's often I think initially, certainly for me, I missed that point for years, and then it suddenly dawned on me that hang on, this is why we tell them in advance. So we give them time, and it's our duty. We give ourselves time. We have an obligation to lead them through that change. So we give them time to do so. We give ourselves time to do so, such that now when the change comes, we're not dealing with the emotional aspect and the physical change at the same time, because that's usually when it's a disaster.
Yep, it's harder. So this card is great, and I'm guessing that the way to get people involved with it, just to hand in the card and say, "Here you go, read it," and let's get it done.
It's a silver bullet.
Yep,
it's that easy. It's just that silver bullet that we've all been looking for.
Yep. So maybe that's not completely true.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So Oscar, why don't you share how people are introduced to JR and what that process looks like?
Sure. I think the first comment I want to make on it is inevitably, we introduce it through the standard TWI J delivery of 5 by 2 hours. I think the first thing to note is people often, you can almost see it on people's faces, particularly with the foundations. Usually someone says it, but if they don't, you can see it on their faces. So this is common sense, which it is. My response to that is, yes, it is common sense. Is it commonplace?
Or common practice.
Or common practice. Two different things. So during the actual, the initial 2-hour class, I suppose, is about framing a model where we go through what it looks like. The principal left part of the model is a supervisor gets results through people. And if you want to prove that, generally what we say sometimes during that conversation is, if you want to prove whether you get results through people or not, I will walk out, you guys go home, and let's see how long the work keeps going for. And usually the response to that is, well, it's going to go for at least a few hours, if not a few days, sometimes a week or two. The counter to that is I'll walk out and send all those people home that we can see out there, and how quickly will the work stop? Well, it'll stop immediately. So there's the first key point that comes out on the left side of the model is the supervisor gets results through people. Then the right side of that model is that we're all individuals. So we all have the common, at this workplace story, for example, we have the common aspect that makes us who we are, which is the work. That's common to us all. But then we all have a different family, and we all have different beliefs, we all have different hobbies, and so on and so forth. So this right half of the model is people need to be treated as individuals. The supervisor needs to filter all out this variation and take into account not filter it out, that's poor use of the term. Take into account the variation that's coming in from all these individuals, their own variation, and through practicing what Kylie's been talking about, not have variation in results. So the first session is about that model. Subsequent sessions are really practicing the use of the routines on the card with real life situations. So people come to the front of the room and they explain a situation they've needed to handle, and then we practice the use of the routine, and that's it gets people started. It's not the be all and end all, far from it. It just gets people started. So broadly, that's the introduction to job relations.
And so we're up to about 100 folks that have been through JR in about 4 years. And so it's a 4-step process, so I assume that...
4-step routine.
4-step routine, yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. So I assume that just gets to the same answer all the time, right?
What? You've lost.
So you follow these steps, obviously it produces the same kind of answer every time.
Yeah, every single time. No, clearly.
It'd be easy.
Yeah.
So the routine, you guys are big on plan, do, check, reflect. So for people watching this who choose not to use the word reflect, Pat's laughing because He insists that we use reflect here for very good reason. But I have to adjust every time I come here because it's plan, do, check, adjust everywhere else I go. But regardless.
They'll catch up.
Yes, they will catch up. And I will catch up. But regardless, plan, do, the routine is the routine of handling a problem, and to some extent using the foundations, is a plan, do, check, adjust routine. Quite simply has a human bent to it. So it's not an unfamiliar routine to anyone who's been practicing problem handling in the workplace for years. What it is, though, quite specifically, is a PDCA routine or PDCA routine with a human bent. And that's what sits it aside from others. So we're going to practice that routine, and it's the routine that we're very diligent about, and we allow the outcomes almost not to take care of themselves. The outcomes will come in, or the inputs and the outcomes will come in through the practicing of that routine, and that's going to vary from situation to situation and individual to individual because all people are individuals. So the routine is a one-shoe-fits-all. The actions, the solutions, I dare I use that word, is going to be particular to the scenarios
and so
situations.
Lots of leadership, I guess prior to us giving here, using JR, was teaching all of the different situations and teaching all of the different ways you need to handle all of the different situations.
Yes.
And that's exhausting, and it's an infinite kind of thing. With the problem handling routine, we can teach the 4 steps, and those apply in just about every situation.
Yeah.
What comes out of that will be unique to the situation.
Yeah. So we teach so people practice the routine. Yeah.
And so we have these cards, and these are part of the training that we go through with Oscar, and you know, it's a good piece to have with you to remind. But ultimately, we're trying not to have to refer to the card every day, but for people simply to that's just the way they do it. That's just the way they think. That's just the way they approach different situations. And quite frankly, individuals who are being led, the hope is all of our supervisors doing this, and they get used to the routine as well. It's just the way that we interact with one another to solve the situations that we find ourselves in.
To handle the situations.
Yep. So,
but before you go on,
yeah.
Can I just get Kylie to reflect on what you said to me after you attended the class, which was 2 or 3 years ago, and got into and started to understand the routine. Do you remember what you said about university and your 4-year degree? Could you I think that's an important point.
Yes.
It's connected to what Pat was getting at.
Something, and tell me if I'm getting off of it a bit, but something around that you really don't learn how to do this in school. They teach you, kind of like what Pat's saying, they teach you about different options and what's legal and different stuff in the HR perspective. But when it really comes to being able to look at a situation individually and kind of know you're in the gray with different stuff you could do and what we're going to do, that was a new concept.
Yeah, new concept as I understood it was I was given the answer. I was taught the answers to situations as opposed to a way of thinking.
Yeah.
And that was a light came on in terms of I no longer need to have the answers, every single answer under the sun. Yeah. But I do need where I felt you needed to go was how do I help people think this way? And that was new. That was a new concept for you.
Well, I think it helped me think through my role so much differently too, because it's a bit terrifying to be 22 years old and the person in the role to say, okay, I'm supposed to have the answer to every single thing that when these supervisors come in and say, how do I handle this person? But now to be able to reframe it to say, okay, well, let's talk through what are the different actions we could take and then what.
And that was a significant adjustment for you, as I recall it, that people had built up an expectation of HR will have the answer.
Yeah.
So you had to make an adjustment to, I don't have the answer, but I am here to help you how to think through the situation so that we collectively come up with something where to try, which is a fundamental change of thinking for, dare I say it, most HR or most HR people in most organisations.
And I think even just for our supervisors as well, to build them up in their confidence to not have to wait for me to be available for them to get an answer to how to, or to at least start the thought process. They still, in good practice, may come and say, here's the action I think I'm going to take.
That's good.
Yeah.
So they should.
Yeah.
I think another thing that comes in here, Pat, if I may, is in session 1, I think it's in session 1, towards the end of session 1 of the 10-hour, where you talk about a small blaze, a small fire being put out with a cup of water. If that's done effectively at the work front level, then it stops the big blaze coming to the HR department. And that's part of what this is about, is how can we help supervisors and frontline leaders handle problems such that they're caught early on, and rather than letting them build up and generate steam, and then all of a sudden we've got HR involved and it's a mess. I think that's the other thing that needs to be, not that they're a mess. The problem is a mess by the time we come to them.
For sure, yeah.
And that's what we're trying to avoid to some degree.
So the 10-hour training, I'll say 80% of it is on the problem handling routine and 20% is probably on the foundations. And so, Kylie, I'd just like you to kind of talk about, so with any training, it's great you go through it and it's all good, but if we don't put that into practice, if we don't have some level of follow-up, it tends to fade away and we go back to doing things the way we've done it. So talk about how we followed up on, to begin with the early classes with JR, maybe how we've modified our thinking and kind of how we're supporting people as they go through more, I guess, systematically as an organization.
Yeah. So starting last year, we added this aspect to, after people go through the 10-hour class, they then go to what's called the JR Foundations workbook classes. And how I explain it kind of in that first training with people when they're like, what am I doing here now? Is you've got really that strong support, really hands-on training with Oscar. It's 10 hours, right? Couple hours, 5 sessions or whatever it is, where you're really hands-on. You've been through that, now you understand the routine. And so we're taking kind of the next step down to say, okay, you're getting a little bit more flexibility or some more time, but then every other week we're going to come back together with the same groups, the same people you've built a relationship with and worked through this with, and we're going to specifically focus each week on one of the foundations, and we're just going to go down the line with them and really go into, what's a situation within this last couple weeks in which you've been able to practice the foundation, what action did you take, and then, what did you learn? But the biggest part about that class that I love is that maybe in the beginning I do most of the talking, but it completely turns into me just saying, all right, who's up next? And then when they share, the other members in the group now have that confidence with JR, and so they're sharing out, oh, I had a similar situation. Here's the action I took, or that sounds really good. Maybe you could consider, if you're continuing with this, to try this. And so they're really collaborating with one another, on each foundation and partnering up. And so we do that for each of the foundations. It's five 1-hour classes, and then after that, we go to virtuals. And so every couple months, we'll jump on a call and check in again and just say, hey, how are things going? What are some things that you've been doing, or how are you utilizing the foundations or the problem side? So we'll give them that opportunity as well. If they say, hey, I've got this active problem, I love to talk through it with the group. They have a buddy in that group as well. And so after the 5 classes with me, they got their buddy from the class that they're checking in with as well between our virtual meetings every couple months. But long story long, it's just we're continuing to support them. And I've asked in the virtual sessions as we started to pilot this, do you want to keep doing this? Is this helpful, or are you too busy? And unanimously every single time it is, no, we keep it on the calendar. We want to do this. We want the reminder. We enjoy the support and to just kind of have our ideas bounced off. So it's been really great, and the feedback, done 3 of them now so far, and then jumping into the next sessions here soon, or next groups, and it's been great.
Fantastic. So Oscar talked a little bit about your commentary after you went through the course. I think shortly after that, Oscar came to me and said, hey, I think Kylie might be really good at being someone here who could be a local person to help support the system or help support the routine and JR and just the whole concepts. And so maybe Oscar, share kind of what transpired after that and how you've helped Kylie kind of grow into the role she's got.
Well, I guess the first thing, if I remember, the first thing we focused on, if I remember rightly, was when someone walks in the door and says, this is happening, tell me what to do. The first thing was the response, was don't answer the question. I guess that was the first thing. Don't answer their question. And it was the transition to turn the card over and suggest that you can guide them through how to handle a problem side. And I think the other thing that's important to that, and this is where I run into some conflict with some others, is that when in the 10-hour, we use a whiteboard and we use the routine. We do it 14 times, 4 examples from the book, and each person comes to the front. So it's 14 times. So I suggested to Kylie, don't change. Some organisations develop forms and all that sort of stuff. And in my mind, that's not what this is about. We've seen the routine 14 times on the whiteboard, so don't change that. So the first thing was, Kylie, when they walk in the door, suggest, unless the place is burning down, suggest a time where they come back and you lead them through the routine. And initially, if I remember rightly, you were thinking, but when we get to possible actions, I'm the one who's got to come up with it. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're the one who facilitates this on the whiteboard and end of story. And of course, if they then need specific HR advice, of course you do. But that's not the primary role. The primary role is to coach the people through the routine using the whiteboard. And the other thing I think that's important that we talked about is the whiteboard tends to neutralise the discussion. If we're sitting in the room here, then it's without the whiteboard, then it's me or you, or the focus is on a person. Whereas if we do it on the whiteboard, the focus becomes on the whiteboard and it becomes the picture that paints the situation. So I know that was something we talked about fairly heavily.
Yeah.
That was one of the main, I guess the key thing was for Kylie not to become an answerer, but a facilitator of the discussion, facilitator of the routine. So that was the first thing. And I think there was, and then you tell me what happened after that. I mean, you tried that. What was your, what was the learnings?
Well, it was interesting. Actually, while I was going, and I'm glad the idea didn't come to involve me until I had been.
Actually, we had one. No, I asked you, do you remember? I had a particular real life problem.
I do remember that.
And I asked you to coach me through the routine.
Yeah.
To use the whiteboard to coach me through.
I remember
that was what we did first. I've forgotten that. For Kylie to practice the routine on the whiteboard with me in the room. Mm-hmm. It was a real life problem, real situation I had brewing back at home.
Yeah.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then it was a case of now, Kylie, you have a go on your own without me around. And then I guess we followed, I don't recall specifically, but we followed up after that.
Well, so when I was going through it as a normal participant, there was a couple people in the class who had gone up and done their whiteboard during the class.
Oh, yeah.
And then they had also come to me outside of it.
That's right.
Because they knew I kind of knew because it was, they had some HR mix into it, as many of them do. And they had come to me and said, Kylie, remember that? Okay, this kind of helped spark my goal to take an action, but can you help me do it? And so kind of at the same time, I was doing it on the back end, but not quite knowing how to facilitate. And I remember touching base with you to say, hey, this is going on simultaneously. And you were like, let's take advantage of that. And
exactly.
let's, I see, it's HR related. And this could be really a good way to unlock, how we, not only just how they individually handle it, but then when they come to HR, if it's totally unified, then we're really walking the walk.
Yeah.
So then it was kind of that too.
And I don't know if it's putting words in your mouth, but what I've found is, not just with JR, but with other things as well, no longer do I have to come up with the answer. I'm getting people to practice the routine. If you practice the routine enough, you will find the way. So rather than be the way finder, I'm with the thinking coaches, if you like, and if you do this enough, you will find that we will help you find the way, or you will discover the way. So I don't discover it for you anymore. But that also can, I don't know, that can also be scary for people. So if all of a sudden they realise that you're not going to provide the answers for them anymore, then that can be a bit scary too, and that has to be handled.
So it's a decent segue. So when we 13 years ago embarked on deploying CP 2.0, the concept was we could foresee the retirement of a lot of long-term, particularly superintendents and some degree project managers that had to run our projects for many, many, many years. And the model within construction was the superintendent was the all-knowing person who told everybody what to do all of the time. He or she always had the answer. Someone would come, they'd get the answer, they would go back to doing what they're doing. Well, their retirement would lead us to a point where we weren't going to be able to replace those people with the same experience level. It just wasn't going to be possible. And so we needed to create routines and rhythms and something we could rely on where we crowdsourced the knowledge, had systematic conversations that the knowledge that was around the table came out, and our leaders didn't have to have all of the answers. So we didn't, Mike and I probably would love to tell you that we had all of this figured out, that this was as connected, TWA is connected to this as it is, and Mike may have had some sense, but for leaders who are not control freaks, because we had a few control freaks who didn't really like the shift we were making, but a burden can be lifted. I am not required to have every answer. What I am required is to have a habit of using the routine to where are we going, where are we at, what's the obstacle, what's the action. And there's different variants. JR is one variant that's related to leadership and people. Well, there are other variants related to others, but it's all the same basic routine.
Correct.
And when we start thinking about that and just intuitively doing that, situations, we'll figure it out. And this is how we will figure it out. There's a confidence, I think, that people should be able to have, that we don't necessarily know what the answer is this second, but we'll figure that out through time. And so I think, and Kylie, I'm curious about your perspective, that I believe that those light bulbs are starting to go off a bit more here over the last 6 to 12 to 18 months, that what felt like different components that we all said were in the story way, people are connecting them and saying, oh, these are all related. It's a fabric, and it's different. If it's different threads as opposed to a separate program here and a separate program here and a separate program there. That this is the way we do it, and it's related. And quite frankly, it needs. They're not separate. They need one another to actually function well. So I'm curious how you kind of see that, what you're hearing from folks. Is my perception accurate, or am I off base?
No, I think it's definitely become, people are, I think, every single day understanding more and more of what the story way is, and seeing it as not just, a word that's going to mean something, but a word that really does in this moment. I'll give you an example that we were at the Iowa State Career Fair, whatever that would have been, a couple months ago. Our engineers, we usually bring in, it's not just us HR people doing that, but we'll bring in our engineers to come to that and really talk to, what these college students are going to become. And when they were talking about, one of them was talking about the company to a prospective applicant, and it mentioned the story way. Like, one of the things that makes us different is the story way, and that's, really we follow all of these routines that help us be better people and help us do our work better and safer, and just kind of hearing that person even share to a student in college that this is what makes us who we are. It's showing that this is becoming
the way.
Yeah.
The story way.
It's fantastic. So, so the other thing that so both of you who guys have talked about respect a few times. Both of you have maybe not directly said, but certainly intimated that there's inquiry into this process. If someone comes in, there's questioning that happens. And one of the things that we'll be sharing here shortly with our folks is we've created 3 key behavior indicators. Respect for every individual, curiosity through humble inquiry, and trustworthy, discuss, make, and keep reliable promises. And I think the thing that's neat is by using the routine of JR and particularly by using the foundations, I think we are absolutely satisfying the first 2 for sure: respect for every individual and curiosity through humble inquiry. It's helpful about keeping promises. Don't get me wrong, but and the thing that I found interesting that there was a group of folks who came up with those behaviors. It wasn't an edict from senior folks that this is what it's going to be. And so I think bubbling up from the different things we're doing is just we're getting better words about describing what it really looks like and feels like. The card is great. And but this is just simply a tool to help us understand, how we should do what we should need to do, and it's about how do we behave and do we understand what that means tangibly. And so it's neat to see when it starts just leaking out in what people say and not. I'm here to tell you that when Mike and I first started going to some of the things we went to, whether it was a Katacon or whether it was Shingo, we just simply started hearing people say things that we had discovered. We were learning different things, and they would refer to it. And we said, we don't have to learn, we don't have to discover everything. We can go where people are, when we can bring things back, and ultimately we've tried to make it our own. And I'll say with JR, we try to stay as close to this one as kind of it's prescribed. Maybe some of the things we'll talk about going forward, we stay in the thinking of it, but have tailor it more to who we are and how it works best for us. But I think I still remember back when Oscar and I were talking about, okay, he's going to come here for the first time. COVID had gotten over, and we were going to start out with JR. We're going to start out with JI, which is job instructions, another piece of TWI. And I said, my feeling at the time was we need to start with JR, but I wasn't sure. So I said, what do you think? He said, no, I think that's the right way to go, and I think we were right, and it's been impactful. The thing that I found interesting the last time he was in October, I sat through a JR course up in Sioux City. I sat in the first one we had, and it was interesting to me about all of the stuff that I had kind of forgotten. It's important to me. I use it, and because of that, what are we doing as you're in now? Some of the early participants.
The Sioux City guys, they're noisy. They're into it. I don't know that it's a bit random what they're into, but they don't hold back.
No. Last October when you were in, Oscar, I sat in and listened to most of a 10-hour course in Sioux City. And I had done the same thing 4 years ago as the first class here in Ames was going through it. And it dawned on me, I realized that, hey, there's things I've forgotten about some of the nuances of why we do what we do and how we do and how it can help. And so I found it really good to have gone through that. And I said, okay, we probably need to do that with some others. And so with the trip you're in right now, how are we addressing that?
So we're going to do a refresher, starting with the people, not with everybody. So we're doing a refresher and going back to the people who first experienced the 10-hour, 3 or 4 years ago now. And I think the other thing that's become very apparent to me through that is that we're now starting to get people to come through. Well, we're now getting people involved in the class who report to these people who are going to be doing the refresher, or report to people higher up the tree. The greatest influence on us as workers is our boss. One of the biggest influences is our boss, is our leader. So what's becoming very apparent, particularly here, less so with Sioux City, is that we need to, and it's a learning from this trip, is that we need to become more conscious of that. Because what won't work well is if we have someone come into the 10-hour class and get taught all this stuff, and they go back to their workspace and it's not happening. that's just going to bring them under. It's going to dilute everything we're trying to do here. So through the refresher, I think it's a real opportunity to just get people to challenge themselves and ask themselves, how well am I practicing the foundations? Where is there a gap? How can I do this better? So that's going to be one of the main goals of the refresher. It's not to regurgitate the trainer's delivery manual. It's to say, I think it gets back to this, to some degree it's common sense, but to have a look in the mirror and say, to what degree is it commonplace in my world? Me, when I look in the mirror. I think that's probably a key underlying tone of the refresher.
And so those early classes, our follow-up, differently than what Kylie shared earlier, was more about having people come with examples of how they had used the problem handling routine.
Yeah, and I did some follow-up with the foundations 2 or 3 times in the second week, but that became very apparent that it's not going to be enough. There needs to be follow-up. And it also needed to be, the danger of that, of only me, was then it becomes Oscar's program, and that's fatal for you for story construction, which is another place where Kylie came in terms of doing the follow-up with the foundations.
And so how have we shifted the follow-up to the people going to the refresher as well?
Yeah, they are, yeah. And I think that's exactly to the point that you're making of it continues. And again, that's kind of how when we go into that foundations class, how I'm explaining it or almost selling it before we start, because I want them right away to be engaged and not think, okay, I just finished this super, time-consuming thing. Why do I have to keep doing this? And so, that explanation of, we don't want you to go through this really not intense, but just like a lot of time-consuming thing for those 2 weeks you're with Oscar, and then just feel like, okay, now I'm on my own. I've just kicked out of the crib and that's it. And so, helping explain that this is a little bit more of you start to walk on your own, but we're there to catch you, and we're going to come back and check how you're walking a little bit. And so the same thing we'll say to the refresher people of, hey, you've been through this, but now this is going to be different, where we're going to continue supporting you after this refresher. And I'm excited to, again, with the newbies who have been doing it, it's been overwhelmingly positive. They don't know what they're getting into, but by the end of the 5 in-person sessions and before we head to those virtual, they're motivated and they're excited, and they make it apparent that even if they miss a class, they email me after on their own being like, oh, Kylie, I'm so sorry I had to miss that. What homework do I need to do? Or can we jump on a Teams call and talk through it since I missed it? So that engagement is really there, and it's fun to get to be a part of it.
I think the other thing that the refresher, I aim to achieve through the refresher is it's fatal to think that leadership is something I do today and it's done tomorrow. It just goes on, and it needs to go on. It's just something that's, if you're going to have people follow you as a leader, then it's something that it's the little things I do every day. Right. And I go back to that statement from the Qantas pilot Richard de Crespigny that he wrote in a book that he sent my way, where trust is built with teaspoons and destroyed with shovels. So it's these foundations will build trust, and I do them a little thing. If I do a little bit every day, fair chance things are going to be okay. And it's not every day for a week and then stop.
It's every day for
the rest of your life.
Yep. Well, we were hopeful JR would be impactful to story. It's safe to say that has been quite impactful and continues to be impactful. So I certainly want to thank both of you for your role in that, because we don't get to where we are without both of you. So thank you for that. And I guess I give each of you a chance to any final comments as we close the session.
I'll just counter that by saying thank you for sticking your neck out with something like this.
It's it didn't appear to be a real big risk. So
no, but you're quite unique as being president of an organisation to have the strength of belief that you do. It's not common.
Kylie, any final thoughts for the audience?
I think it's just if you aren't doing this at your organization or you haven't been through it yet, be excited to be curious about it, because it is really impactful, and it's common sense, but there's those little things of reminders that, especially when you get into the situation where you're the supervisor or whatnot, and your emotions run high, which we don't always consider. That person's being emotional, and that's why I have to handle it. But you're very emotional in that moment, and this is such a great way to stop and make a more reasonable action, because we're able to take our emotions out a little bit and follow the routine. So if you view it that way and you go into it, you're going to have a much better experience. And I'm really glad we do this at Story and to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you much. Appreciate it. This was great, and look forward to the next ones. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat.